Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program is brought to you by old friends Madisonville Marine. The boat show comes to the Knoxville Convention Center this Thursday through Sunday. Madisonville Marine will have over 30 boats on display, plus terrific incentives and rebates on 5 different makes of boats, Yamaha outboard motors. Madisonville Marine, the boat show, Thursday through Sunday, right here at the Knoxville Convention Center. All right. I've spoken to people over there at UT. Well, first of all, Jimmy, you wrote a great piece this week on gridironnow.com. It's also on sportsradiownml.com. Folks can check that out. I think from what I've talked to people at UT, I think what you lay out, and you kind of delve into the criminal aspects of these things, and it's very much he said, she said. There was alcohol involved in a lot of these cases. Only one of these cases has made it to trial phase.
Correct.
And I think a lot of that, from the people I've talked to over there, I think that's very much going to be Tennessee's defensive strategy, or at least a part of it. I think when you also have Jenny Wright and you have a 38-year vice chancellor like Tim Rogers, I think it's going to be obvious that they will try and discredit them and also paint them as disgruntled. That'll be up to the defense to say that. Those are naturals. But here's the thing. UT will need to do more, I think, than just poke holes in the criminal aspects, because there are still people who don't grasp this. We ran through the first segment last week's show. It's on sportsource.tv. If you got a friend who doesn't grasp this, send them to sportsource.tv and have them click on last week's first segment. There are still folks that don't understand, well, if the cops didn't do this, what kind of trouble could there be? And as we discussed in a previous segment, it's not just the cops. The cops could pass on it. If the UT student conduct group, or whichever path they chose to go through, if they found them guilty and Tennessee made any kind of favorable moves, that puts Tennessee in trouble with Title IX. Jimmy, do you think, the focus is on the criminal stuff, obviously. Right. You've got to discredit all that. Do you think they're going to be prepared to answer each and every one of these Title IX things? Because that's just as important, if not more important.
They better be. And as I wrote, I don't know if Tennessee complied with Title IX. I can't answer that. All I could look at were the criminal situations. But here's the thing. Did Tennessee investigate these in a timely fashion? Were they thorough in their investigation? And did they treat the student athletes just as they would any other student on campus? To me, those are the 3 things they have to be able to prove in Title IX. I can't answer whether they did that or not. I don't know. But that's what they're going to have to do, is to show, yes, we were compliant and we did our due diligence on each of these cases.
And part of this also is going to be, because you're going to a trial, whatever a trial is, when it comes to pass, everyone will predict how it will go down. That's useless. You can't predict how a court case will go, because you don't know how the people hearing it will absorb the same information that you hear. You know how they'll take this. So when you look at it, and we're looking at preponderance of evidence, let's say Tennessee is buttoned up on 90% of those things. All right? Does 10% that you're not buttoned up, is that enough to make somebody say, yes, you had a bad culture there, you violated Title IX? The criminal versus the Title IX aspects, your feelings on whether or not Tennessee will have as many answers as you want to see.
After we did the show last week, I went and tried to read a little bit more about this. And here's the reason that lawyers are lawyers. If they really understand all the ways, the different directions it can go, I understand how come people are confused by it. I can understand how come people think if they weren't guilty of anything, then Tennessee did nothing wrong. That's my original reaction too. And sometimes I even go back to it. But there's no better word for it. It is so murky. And like you said, and we talked about it, Tennessee could have done 90%, 80%, 99% of everything right and done one thing wrong, and you lose this case. And I know we're not getting into settle, don't settle arguments again, but go online and read about this, at what happened at other schools, and see the directions that it can go.
Yeah, I think when you look at it from Tennessee's perspective, the lawyers from Nashville, and you may think they're sleazy or whatever, they're clearly good at what they do. They put the pressure on you to settle, because they don't want to spend 3 years litigating this. They're like locusts. They want to settle and move on to the next payday. But they have thrown so much into the fire. Part of that is for press, and part of it, I think, is just to make UT have to sweat all of it. Because when you look at everything they have filed, Tennessee's defense, yes, you're going to address all these criminal things, you're going to talk about Rogers and Wright, you're going to have to come up with an answer for all these Title IX issues too. I just think that the UT's defensive team, and I'm sure they're great, but they got a lot of work ahead of them.
Well, I think UT is looking at it like you have to resolve the criminal aspect of this before you do anything else. And the majority of civil cases never make it to trial. They're usually settled or dismissed. So I think you have to, that's one reason I think there was not very much talk about a settlement on Tennessee's part, is because this criminal thing would still be out there. Even if you settle, you still have this to deal with down the line. And once this is resolved one way or the other, I think that'll have a huge impact on whether or not you do go ahead and say, okay, we'll go to court on Title IX.
Just a quick thought on that. If in your discovery, Tennessee's attorneys find you violated Title IX, you better settle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So in discovery, when they do all this, I don't know what they're going to find. But if you do find that you did something wrong, you better go ahead and settle that thing.
Well, Florida State settled, and I said last week, I want to correct something. I said Baylor settled their lawsuit. It wasn't a lawsuit. They settled it before it became a lawsuit with the girl, and she was the sexual assault down there. The player was found guilty criminally. So a little different situation, but still they settled theirs up front. And you're right. If Tennessee finds any kind of slippage here, you better. And the trouble is, you could go through this for 3 years, not settle, fight it, and still lose. That's the gamble you're making. Either way, it's a gamble. All right, you got something to add, Mike?
The only thing I would have to add is if you've ever been on jury duty, and I haven't been in a jury room on a civil case like this, personally, my experience, I was horrified and dumbfounded by what I perceived to be the lack of logic in the jurors discussing this. So I'd be afraid to say anything to a jury.
I would echo that because I was in one too. Yeah.
You were Henry Fonda. You had the switchblade ready and threw it into the desk.
Hey, if you think it's tough being on the jury, you ought to try being the defendant.
Glad you said it right. When we come back, we're going to play a new game. Can you believe it? Manning, Harbaugh, much more. Come on back.